excited to be able to talk with you about our risk management options for tribes and tribal members for non-insured crop programs. And so USDA or the Farm Service Agency, which we represent, back a while ago, and I started to look this up today, but got distracted. Can someone confirm that they can see my screen, the screen with the field on it?
I can see
Yeah,
it,
we can
Kara.
see it.
I can.
Okay, good. The blue box went away from me, so I just wanted to double check. We've had the non-insured crop disaster program in various reiterations for a few years now. And this last farm bill that we're in right now, the 2018 farm bill, made some of the coverage elections options for buy-up coverage permanent. And the non-insured crop disaster program is really designed to provide an affordable risk management option to help reduce some of those losses for producers of crops that are not covered by federal crop insurance. So I always say we insure everything from arugula to zucchini, and it can be on several hundred acres or fractions of an acre. There's no minimum acreage requirement for NAP. So real quickly, kind of about how the coverage cycle works. The first thing that producers need to do is apply for the coverage. And that just simply involves telling us what crops they want coverage on and what levels of coverage. And then there's acreage reporting, in which they tell us, producers tell us what types of or how many acres they have of particular crops. The notice of loss is about reporting the disaster or the event that you think may cause a loss. And I think if there was one thing that I would tell all new NAP producers, because sometimes people will say, well, I had a bunch of rain on my farm, but I don't know if it is enough to cause a loss. And my big advice is report that, give us a notice of loss as that disaster or as that weather event happens in real time, so that we can track it with your policy to make sure that we have the information. And if it comes down to it caused a loss in the end, then you have the information already in our system. That's a lot easier than having to backtrack at the end of the year and say, oh, my production is way down, and then try to figure out if you had a loss. So just a word about notice of loss. We're not going to talk about it tons today because we're really going to focus on these first two pieces, mostly the first piece, the application for coverage. But then, so we go through the growing season. At the end of the growing season, producers report their production, tell us how much they produced. And then at the end, we calculate if there was a loss according to the amount of insurance the producer has purchased or enrolled in, and then we make the payments. Now there's, of course, details in each of these steps, but this was designed to give you a quick overview of what the NAP program is. So at FSA, we are very concerned with dates. And so the two biggest dates for the NAP program are the application for coverage deadline and the acreage reporting deadline. And they're broke down loosely by sort of type of crop. So you can see there, wild rice has an application for coverage deadline the end of September. Our value loss crops are things that can't really be measured in a yield per acre. So like Christmas trees, flowers, things like that. Those have a September 30th application for coverage deadline, along with rhubarb and garlic. They just got stuck in there somehow. And then the next one is November 20th with our perennial fruits, apples, strawberries, grapes. things like that. And then the end of the year for maple sap and honey. And then our biggest deadline is coming up on March 15th, as someone, I think Dan alluded to, is that it is our spring planted annual crops. So this is the arugula and the zucchini and all of the things kind of in between that we're starting to think about planting in the spring. There are other dates and deadlines for the notices of loss and the applications for payments that I talked about on the previous screen. But those would be explained once you take out a policy. But these are the ones that we wanted you to be sure that you were aware of. We do, if you were really interested in coverage, we do have some policy or some provisions for late filed applications for coverage. I would invite you to speak to your local county office about your situation specifically and what crops you have and what types of coverage you are looking for, and we can go from there. Once we have the coverage, then we talk about what kinds of things are covered in this coverage. And you see here the list of eligible causes of loss: drought, moisture, flooding, freeze, lightning, hail, wind. A pretty, I think, self-explanatory. One note that I will make is that we do use weather data to confirm disaster events. All of our processes go through what FSA has as a county committee structure, who look and make sure that the application or the particular process met the FSA regulations and guidelines and things like that. So county committees would be looking at weather data to confirm the causes of loss for anyone who has files a notice of loss. So what types of things aren't covered under NAP? And those are things like wildlife damage, inability to market the crop. We saw this with ginseng and hemp over the last couple of years, where the markets really kind of dried up for those two crops, and that would have not been a eligible cause of loss. Failure to follow good farming practices. We define good farming practices are the cultural practices generally used to make normal progress toward maturity and produce the yield that we think that particular crop should be able to get. We consult often ag experts in the area. A couple of examples of that would be like not following the recommended crop rotation. I know that with hemp, there are some very specific crop rotation recommendations. And so if you didn't follow those and you had a loss, we would find that as an ineligible cause of loss. Otherwise, like irrigation equipment failure, herbicide drift, things like that are not covered under this risk management service. So that's a little kind of a very brief overview of NAP. Now, the next question that is probably on your mind is, how much does it cost? And so we have a service fee, which is $325 per crop. And you can see we do have some maximums there. $1,950 if you are in multiple counties, or $825 per county. This is non-refundable. So if you come into our office on March 14th and you say, yeah, I want to do this, and you take it out, and then something happens and you decide not to, we do not refund that service fee. However, we also waive our service fee for historically underserved producers. So these might be producers who have been prejudiced against or experience prejudice for race or gender, who are limited resource, who have income below the national poverty level, beginning farmers that have been farming for less than 10 years, or a veteran farmer, which is a farmer who was a veteran in the last 10 years and has also started farming in the last 10 years. Excuse me. And we do have a specific form to complete this if you believe you fall into one of these categories. you will complete our, it's called the CCC 860 form. And that will, the completion of that form, it's a complete self-certification, so we don't ask for any information. We do have, there is a limited resource tool, and I will maybe put the link in the chat if that's something that you're interested in. But you just sign this form saying I fall into, you check the box of the particular category that you fall into, and then with that form, that waives your service fees. So the service fees is one piece, and those are set pieces. And then the other piece of our coverage is the premium, or we have different coverage levels. Service fee is no matter how much insurance you're getting, and then you can pick your coverage level beyond that. So we have our basic 50-55 coverage, which is 50% of the yield and 55% of the average market price. So that means that you have to have a 50% loss in order to receive an indemnity on your crop at that coverage level. Now, the good news is, so you need a historic, like pretty much a catastrophic loss, but there is no premium for that. This is beyond the service fee, it's a totally free coverage. Each crop that we insure across the state has a yield and a price that is set. And those are established to set and calculate the losses and the annual production histories. So beyond that basic coverage, we also have options to buy up coverage. And these range from 50 to 65% in increments of 5%. And you can see on your screen how they go up. And then you can get, the price then goes up to 100%. So we will pay the indemnity on 100% of the average market price that we have set. And this is set by our state committee. Every year they go through each crop, and we use a lot of varying different resources to determine the price and the yield, but they set them annually. The other piece of perhaps good news is that you don't need your premium money up front. The premiums are billed the following year. So right now, we just finished collecting 2022 premiums. The bills usually come out in January and they're due in February of the following year. The one caveat about buy-up coverage is that if you were a new producer coming in our doors and wanted to get coverage on your tomatoes or whatever, you have to have a growing history. So you have to have at least 1 year of growing those tomatoes in which you had 50% of the county tea yield. And if you're interested in what those numbers are, you can contact any of our offices and we can tell you what those expected yields are. So once you decide, the next little block there on our screen shows the loss triggers. So again, if you have the basic coverage, you have to have a 50% loss, and then it goes down from there. So the highest loss, if you had a 35% loss, you would get an indemnity if you had the 65-100 coverage. Any questions so far? All right, I'll keep going. So the basic coverage, I think I said, has no premium. The buy-up coverage does have a premium, and I can't just say, it's $500 because we, of course, have a little math. Everything that we do involves some sort of math around here. But so we take the producer's share and we multiply that by the eligible acres and the yield and the coverage level that you established, those coverage levels from this previous screen. And then the percent of the applicable price. And then a 5.25% premium factor. So you can see here that every producer's premium is going to be calculated a little bit different based on their shares and yield and acres. And the other piece is that form that we talked about, the CCC 860, that also entitles producers who have that form filled out for a 50% reduction in their premium. So I have here just a quick example of 3 acres of hemp that is grown for CBD. And you can see up here our math. We took a producer's share of 100% times 3 acres times their yield of 828 times their coverage level. In this scenario, they took the full 65-100 coverage level. So then they receive also 100% of the price, which at the time that I did this example was $1.22. And then we multiply that by our premium factor. And so you can see here that for that 3 acres of hemp, at the highest level, at the 65-100 level, it is $103. And yes, 100. And so then if this was a socially disadvantaged producer, it would be half of that. If you have a crop, you can get this little piece that just popped up here on the bottom. You can get that estimated premium calculator from any crop that we offered coverage on from any FSA office. So if you were just curious about what it would cost for those tomatoes, you can call your local FSA office and they can run this estimated premium calculator for you and tell you. We use we wouldn't have your specific yield, but we would use kind of the county substitute yields for that. Okay. So then the next question is, okay, I have this coverage. I see how much it's going to cost me. What do I get paid? And so again, we go back to our math and we first will calculate your disaster level. And then we would determine your production for payment. So we would say, okay, given this coverage level, and this is our same 3 acres of hemp that we had on our last screen. So at that 65% coverage level, their disaster level is 1,615 pounds. And so and you can see on the next spot right here, that their production was 325 pounds. So then we subtract their disaster level, and we come up from their production to count, or their production to count from their disaster level, and we come up for that net production for payment. And then we multiply that by the price and go through the payment factor. And for the purposes of this example, we didn't have any other factors because we do reduce the indemnity if the crop is not harvested and or if the crop is prevented planted because you didn't incur some of those expenses. So that kind of gives you I'll just finish the thought on this payment. So this producer here got a payment of $1,574 for that $103 coverage that he had, which we saw on this previous screen. So now that you've had sort of a crash course in NAP, what are the next steps? If you're interested in applying for coverage, like I said, you can go to the key starts at your local FSA office, and I will show you how to find those in the next slide. But you're going to go to that office and you have to have some personal information and some crop information. So we would need your name and contact information, something to show that you had risk in the crop, like a lease or, some kind of ownership. And then the 860 or the service fee, direct deposit information, and then the list of crops and their intended use, whether it's fresh or processed, and then organic status, and then what coverage level that you need. That's what you need really to get that initial application going. After that, if you decide that you want buy-up coverage, the most important thing that we need is actually listed last here is this historical production information. so that because like I said, you have to have at least 1 year of successfully growing the crop before we will extend buy-up coverage to you. And then we have some other eligibility forms, like our highly erodible wetland forms and our farm operating plans and our adjusted gross income forms. And those forms can be done after the application process. There are standard forms, so if you have worked with FSA at all, you've most likely already filled out all of those other forms and you would not need them again. I see a question, Kaya. No?
Hi, yeah,
Oh,
sorry, I was muted. So in your example for the 3 acres of hemp, I know it was just an example, but where would you say that falls on like the spectrum of, you know, I guess like payment for premiums and payouts in terms of all the various crops? Like, is there one that you get, is there a certain crop that is paid out more than another crop, or are they all kind of calculated evenly? Is the system set up to be most?
Well, the formula is the same. So the formula of how we calculate the payment is the same no matter if that is hemp or apples. If you're asking like, is one crop more susceptible to losses? Is that more of your question? Because I'm not 100% sure that I understand.
I think I'm getting it. The variety of crops, is one going to have a higher payout? And I think, Kara, if you don't mind me speculating, is probably has to do with the value of the crop in that calculation.
Right.
Is that
right? Yeah.
Is that
Is
that driving to? Okay.
So it would. I mean, certainly we do have some high value crops. So if that price of that hemp was like $5, you can see where the price fit into this calculation here and what that would do to that payment. So if this was a 5 instead of $1.22, that would be a higher value crop. So each crop is based on their price as far as the value. Did that explain it?
Yes, thank you. Sorry,
Okay.
that might have been a silly
fine.
question.
No, that's totally fine. No such thing. Laura, did you have a question too?
I do. So if you go to the other screen and it talks about your personal information, we looked into getting this crop insurance for Ohelagoo, like in our first couple of years. And the farm service person wanted each one of our social security numbers for each person in our group because we're a co-op. And we said, no, we're not giving out 15 social security numbers. But we do have a 501c5 designation from the federal government, and we do have a tax ID number. Would that be the number we would use then?
So you would be an entity.
Yeah.
Correct. So you would apply as that entity. And it is true that you, in order for, you can get, it's kind of a little bit complicated when it comes to entities, but you can apply for the coverage as the entity and use your EIN number, and there should not be a problem. Now, however, when it comes to payments, that's when it gets a little tricky because we have to have an EIN number for the members because we use something called direct attribution. So your entity, if this 100, let's use this little example here. This $1,574, that's what the entity is paid, but each member of the entity is attributed a certain percentage according to their shares in the entity. So if it was like, for example, my husband and I had an LLC and we got this payment of $54.74 for $1,574. And I had 50% and my husband had 50%. We would each have an attribution behind the scenes of whatever 15, about $800-ish, $750 something. So, and that gets all added together for like the purposes of payment limitation, because if I'm a member of 17 other organizations, my $800 from this payment would be added up to all of my other payments. So that's why we do need the social security numbers or tax ID numbers of members of the entities. But we will, I believe if they choose not to give us them, we will prorate that payment according to the shares of people that don't give us their social security numbers. And that's something a little bit new. So I think that might be something worth investigating if that was that applied to your situation.
Yeah, I think maybe that's Laura, that's I think a very good question. And Kara, maybe let's revisit that a bit more, because I think I can think of some other instances as well where there may be some unique circumstances and something meriting further evaluation. But yeah, that's a very good question there, and I think a major issue.
Okay. So to find your local FSA office, you do, the easiest thing to do is go to farmers.gov, and at the very top corner, you'll see a little link that says service centers. And then this screen pops up that says the state, and you can select your state and county from the dropdown and hit go, and then it will show you the service center contact information nearest you. And so that is what I had for an overview. Are there other questions? And you can see my contact information on the screen. You're welcome to call or email me. I'm happy to have further discussions with you about your particular scenarios, and we can go from there.
Great. Thank you, Kara. That was very informative. And I know that there's probably, as we get moving on this, there'll probably be some further questions from potential applicants. But great overview. And I think now we'll go to the Risk Management Agency, who is going to talk about additional options for crop insurance.